Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1931's The Black Camel, directed by Hamilton McFadden. Before I begin this intro, let me give credit where it's due. Much of the information I have concerning the story of Charlie Chan comes from Yuen Tui Heng's excellent book, Charlie Chan, The Untold Story of the Honorable Detective and His Rendezvous with American History. The Black Camel is the fourth Charlie Chan movie made. The first was a silent 10-chapter serial. 1926 is The House Without a Key, made by Pathé Studios and directed by Spencer G. Bennett, and featured George Kua as Chan. I believe this is a picture of Kua in character, but I'm not sure. Production stills from the movie are just about impossible to find. Kua, as you can see, looks good as Charlie Chan. He fits the description of the character created by Earl Dare Biggers at the very least. The second Chan movie, 1927's The Chinese Parrot, featuring Kamiaya Sojin as the detective, displeased Biggers as he felt the casting was incorrect, as Sojin was a tall, thin man with a somewhat sinister appearance. Both Kua and Sojin were Japanese, which is a bit odd considering Chan is not Japanese but Chinese. In the books, Chan was vehemently anti-Japanese, which is no surprise considering the repeated invasions of the China mainland by Japan. The casting was SOP in Hollywood, however. America at that time was very much in an anti-foreigner period, which is doubly confusing considering the country allegedly had wide open arms to immigrants. There was a large and popular movement to prevent immigrants, at this time Asian ones, from coming into the country. Miscegenation was very much on a lot of people's minds. We couldn't have those little yellow monkeys hooking our darling daughters on opium and deflowering the bloom of American, read white, womanhood. The Chinese were fine as long as they were working on the railroads, but they should have gone back home when they were done. In Hollywood, if you had Asian features, you got cast as whatever Asian-type character was needed in a film. At the time this film was made, the country was undergoing a love affair with Asian culture, if not Asian people. On May 18, 1927, Sid Grauman, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks opened Grauman's Chinese Theater Movie Palace in Los Angeles, and the movie studio started looking for Asian-themed stories to make into films. One of the series started at that time was based on Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu novels, which reflected the Yellow Peril point of view. And on the other side of the coin, it was Earl Dare Biggers' creation, Charlie Chan. Earl Dare Biggers was born on August 26, 1884 in Warren, Ohio. After graduating Harvard University, he found work with the Cleveland Plain Dealer and at Bob's Merrill Publishing House. In 1908, he was hired by the Boston Traveler to write a humor column and then became their drama critic. His scathing reviews of the theater offerings in the city offended a lot of people, and when the paper changed owners, he was fired. My kind of reviewer. After suffering this setback in his career, he penned his first mystery novel, 7 Keys to Baldpate. The book was a huge hit, and George M. Cohan produced a stage play of the story, which enjoyed a long run on Broadway. After publishing a couple more books, Biggers became involved in writing for the stage, and the job took a toll on his health. He and his wife took a vacation to Hawaii, and after his batteries were recharged, he decided to write a book set in Hawaii. Since it had been several years since his trip to the islands, his memory of the place was a bit dim, so he visited a library and started reading the Hawaiian newspapers to refresh his memory. While doing this, he ran across a small story concerning 2 members of the Hawaiian police force, Chang Apana and Lee Fook. Biggers later stated, I had seen movies and read stories about Chinatown and wicked Chinese villains, and it struck me that a Chinese hero, trustworthy, benevolent, and philosophical, would come nearer to presenting a correct portrayal of the race. The character he created was an instant hit. He was everything Biggers envisioned him to be, and funny to boot. His aphorisms, while derided by some as fortune cookie wisdom, are always funny, wise, and straight to the point. Chan does struggle with English sometimes as it's his second language, but he never pulls the cliche of pronouncing L as R and vice versa. He's an excellent detective, always watching everything, missing nothing, and inevitably solving whatever murder or series of murders he's faced with. Biggers worried that he would suffer the same fate as Arthur Conan Doyle did with Sherlock Holmes, which is the writer's version of an actor's getting typecast. He'd get locked into writing Charlie Chan novels and the public would never accept anything else from him. He wanted to flex his creative muscles a bit farther. As he was contemplating writing a different type of novel in 1929, the stock market crashed and the wisdom of continuing on the path his feet were already on became apparent. The next book he wrote, The Black Camel, became the basis for the film you'll see tonight. After the book was published, Biggers traveled to Hawaii, where he presented Chang Apana with an autographed copy of the book. After publishing his sixth and last Chan novel, The Keeper of the Keys, Earl Del Biggers died of a heart attack on April 5, 1943 in Pasadena, California. I should say at this point that there is a lot more to the story of Charlie Chan, but I'm going to do 3 separate shows featuring the films and the actors who portray the title character. So I'm going to spread this information out across those 3 intros. The Black Camel was shot on location in Hawaii by Fox, who were banking on the movie being a major hit. Fascination with the islands was at an all-time high, and as the islands had been annexed by the United States, but not yet inducted as a state, it was then, as it still is, considered wildly exotic. There are some rear screen projection shots in the film, but the background plates were shot on location. The hotel scenes in the film were actually shot at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel in Waikiki Beach. Chang Apana, a big fan of the series, was invited to the set to watch the filming and posed for this picture with the star Warner Oland. Interesting, although we see Chan at the breakfast table with his very large family, he has 13 children, all very Americanized in their speech and actions. Number one son is not his eager assistant in this movie. Instead, he has this little whirlwind of a guy named Kishimo who keeps running up to Chan and shouting, "Clue!" Introducing number one son in the later films was a good idea. I especially enjoy that morning breakfast scene in the Chan household. Although it's quite short, it tells you a lot about the character. Charlie is at the head of the table, as is traditional, and his 13 children sit around it, all of them calling him Pop and cracking wise about the case he's currently working. You can see he's a bit distressed about his children, who were, after all, raised in Hawaii, being Americanized. But he deals with it as he should, with a sense of humor. Not only that, it shows that he is a loving, responsible parent who is doing an excellent job raising his large family and executes his responsibilities diligently. It says a lot of good things about the character and humanizes him in the bargain. On to the bios. Warner Oland was born Johann Werner Oland on October 3, 1879 in the village of Bjurholm, Sweden. After his family emigrated to the States in 1892, Oland graduated grade school and went to work on Broadway while in his 20s, and then moved to California, where he worked at a series of odd jobs. He appeared in small roles and worked his way up to a co-starring role in Warner's first talking picture, appearing as the cantor, Al Jolson's father, in 1927's The Jazz Singer. Having a bit of Mongolian blood in his veins, he soon began landing roles as Asian characters, and in fact appeared as Dr. Fu Manchu himself in 1929's The Mysterious Dr. Fu Manchu, and 1930's The Return of Fu Manchu, before landing the role that made him famous, the title role in 1931, Charlie Chan Carries On, followed the same year by tonight's film. He starred in other films, of course, but Oland became so identified with the character of Chan that he was permanently assigned to it. He had a habit of taking a nip of alcohol before shooting began, which apparently helped him get into character. His movements would slow and his speech became more measured. Unfortunately, this habit soon led to Oland's alcoholism. Key Luke, who portrayed Lee Chan, remembered sitting in the studio commissary with Oland, who carried 2 thermoses, saying to Luke, "For number one son, good split pea soup. For honorable father," here he would steal a glance around to make sure nobody was watching, before pouring out a martini for himself, "tiger tea." As is usual, Oland's consumption of alcohol contributed to his eventual physical and mental breakdown, culminating in a divorce from his wife. The studio, as was their habit at the time, kept this deep undercover and saw to it that Oland was hospitalized to dry out. After his rehab, as they call it today, he took a vacation to his hometown in Sweden, where he fell ill with bronchial pneumonia and died on August 6, 1938. He was 57 years old. Robert Young was born Robert George Young on February 22, 1907 in Chicago, Illinois. After being spotted on stage while performing at the Pasadena Playhouse, he won a contract with MGM and exclusively played second characters, likable and charming but bland. The Black Camel was his first movie. Louis B. Mayer claimed he didn't have any sex appeal, but he was such a reliable, genial actor that he got a lot of work. He was a favorite co-star of many of the biggest actresses in Hollywood. A born introvert in the business of extroverts, he turned to drinking in order to deal with the problem, which led to a near lifelong struggle with alcoholism in addition to suffering from depression. When his film career dried up, he moved to radio in 1949, starting a show for which he would become famous, Father Knows Best. The role of Jim Anderson was tailor-made for Young, and he excelled in it. You might say the blandness that Louis B. Mayer was all over served him well in the role. He starred on the program for 5 years before it moved on to television. It was nearly canceled by CBS, and when it moved to NBC, it found its audience and stayed on the air until 1960. After taking a 7-year sabbatical and suffering a nervous breakdown, he came back to TV selling Sanka coffee and making guest appearances on various TV shows and television movies. In 1969, he appeared in an ABC Movie of the Week entitled Marcus Welby, MD, A Matter of Humanities. The Marcus Welby Show followed and ran for 7 years. After the show was canceled, he finally overcame his addiction to alcohol and went back to guest appearances throughout the 1980s until finally retiring. Robert Young died from respiratory failure on July 21, 1988 in Westlake Village, California. Bela Lugosi, right off his success as Dracula, appears in this film as a fortune teller, Tornavero. There is something I should mention here so I can get it out of the way. The character of Charlie Chan tends to rub some people the wrong way. Something I've noticed about racists and adherents of political correctness alike is the fact that they both have closed minds when it comes to race or the representation of race. The racists will only see what they are taught to hate, while the PC crowd will do the same thing, only on the other side of the coin. Charlie Chan, although he is in some ways a stereotypical Asian, is nonetheless valued, respected, and considered a true friend by the always white detective investigating whatever case he's working on. Many of the suspects are awed by his presence. "You're the famous Charlie Chan?" they'll exclaim. There are, of course, a fair share of suspects who resent the fact that a mere Chinaman is sticking his nose in their business, ones who think of him as little more than a bumbling, mumbling fool of an Asian. But these are the characters who invariably have their butts handed to them by Chan. Then you have Jimmy Chan, the Americanized number one son. He's everything Charlie is not, impulsive, reckless, and foolhardy. However, many times, in spite of his anxious bumbling, he saves not only his father's life, but the lives of others, and Charlie thanks and congratulates his son for the presence of mind. In some of the later films, Charlie has a chauffeur named Birmingham Brown, who's played by Mantan Moreland, one of the top purveyors of the eye-popping feet studio duty comedy Relief School, which was, for the most part, the only role a black man could get in the movies at that time. A lot of people get bent out of shape by this character, but he's treated sympathetically, at least by the writers, if not the white characters. And he also comes through in a pinch to rescue his employer in spite of his timidity. You guys know how I feel about political correctness, but it does bother me to see how the white characters in these movies order the black characters around. And I have to remind myself that these movies were simply made in a less enlightened time. I'm not saying that makes it acceptable, but what's past is past, and I think everyone would do well to remember that. That being said, The Black Camel is an interesting, entertaining movie. Watching Warner Oland settle into his role as Charlie Chan is quite satisfying, seeing the little bits of business he puts in, and you can see he's enjoying himself. In addition, the movie is just fun to watch. I've always been a fan of mystery and detective movies, and this is a good one. In the upcoming shows, we'll take a look at the Sidney Toler section of the series and wind up with the Roland Winters movies. So right now, sit back, relax, and enjoy The Black Camel right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.